All right, boys and girls, continuing in our series of Ask Me Anything. It seems like this video series, a lot of you like it. Send in your questions if you have them, and I'll compile them and put together the questions that most people seem to want to know. So these are 5 questions that I get variations of over and over and over again. Okay, first question. How would you compare Acuhase versus McIntosh in general? I'm looking at the Acuhase E5000 versus the McIntosh MA9500. Now, these two are integrated amplifiers, but the answer I'm going to give you seems to be consistent regardless. So here are the general specifications. The McIntosh 9500 integrated amp is 300 watts per channel, whether it's 2 ohms, 4 ohms, or 8 ohms. That's because of the audioformer. It has a built-in DA2 DAC module. It's got moving magnet, moving coil phono stage, and the damping factor is about 40. Now the Acuhase, power-wise, is quite similar. It's 240 watts into 8 ohms and 320 into 4 ohms. There's no phono or DAC. You have to buy them separately. And the damping factor is 1,000 versus 40 for McIntosh. The Acuhase E5000 is the top of the line for the Class A/B series, whereas the MA9500 is one level below the MA12000. They're both, I think, rated for very similar power, but the 12000 has a tube preamp section, whereas the 9500 uses solid state. Okay, there are some sonic similarities. They're both on the warmer side than of neutral. In other words, both have a slight richness compared to other solid state or other integrated amps, I should say, that are perhaps a bit more neutral. And what I mean by that, I should describe. When a product has a character, you can hear it fairly consistently. So when I say it's warmer, when you play recordings, when you switch from one recording to another, you will hear there's a certain level of richness in the mid-range and maybe in the high frequencies as well. Whereas with other products, when you switch different recordings, you hear differences, much more so. McIntosh in particular has a much warmer, more relaxed character. It's like your favorite jeans, your favorite shoes. It's just so comfortable. Even when the recording is particularly harsh, it never gets in the way of the music too much. If it's really, really bad in terms of the high frequencies, you'll hear it, but rarely does it get grating. Does that make sense? Where the Acuhase is not quite as forgiving, not quite as warm, but it's definitely still on the warm side. So these are some of the similarities. However, there are a lot of differences. The McIntosh has a wider soundstage. When you listen to the same cut, the McIntosh seems to give you a more spacious take on the sound, whereas the Acuhase tends to be more focused. The soundstage is still very wide, but the images within the soundstage are more precise, more centered, more focused, has more sharp outlines. The depth with the Acuhase, it's more neutral. In other words, when some recordings have depth, you will hear more of it, and when the recordings don't, it's more foreshortened. Whereas the McIntosh tends to always have this nice layers of depth. It's always there, which is really quite wonderful to hear, especially if you're interested in an illusion. Dynamics. The McIntosh bass, especially the low frequency, is more voluptuous, more powerful, more energetic. The Acuhase from mid-bass on is actually better, but in the low bass, the McIntosh is better. Now, in terms of tightness, the Acuhase has it in spades. It's so much tighter, much more resolute. You can hear things better. You can hear the details better. It starts and stops better. The McIntosh is a little bit more wallowy. Not like slow, but more wallowy. Not quite as tight, but it's got a bigger wump, if you understand what I'm trying to say. In terms of macrodynamics, loud and soft differences, they're both fairly similar. But in microdynamics, the little swings, the Acuhase is better. In terms of high frequency, I already mentioned, they're both very smooth, but the McIntosh is a little bit sweeter and a little bit rounder and a little bit perhaps more soft, whereas the Acuhase tends to be more open and more airy. What else am I missing here? So I was thinking about an analogy I could give you, and because I know cars a bit better, I'm going to use cars as an example. During COVID, I got really bored, and one day I was thinking, I've never owned a Mercedes personally. My wife, I bought her years ago a Mercedes, but it was her car. It was never. I thought it would be nice to experience a Mercedes at least once in my life, and so I started looking, and I found out that you could buy a used S-Class for a lot cheaper than a new one, a lot cheaper. So I found an S550. It was 3 years old at that point. It still had warranty. It only had about 40,000 kilometers. The previous owner was an older person. And so I said, fine. It was like, I bought it and it was great. It had massage seats. It had beautiful soft leather and all these toys and features. It had night vision. Mike is laughing at me. Only old people talk about things like this. It had a little perfume canister in the glove box that every 3 or 4 minutes it would squirt something. And it just infused the air with this light, delicate fragrance that didn't stick on you. It was just very light, but it was very refreshing. It had the early versions of assistance driving, so you could set the cruise control in such a way so that if the car in front of you stops, it would stop with you and things like that. It was just really relaxing. And yet it had more than enough power that from 0 to 60 would do about 4.5 seconds. I mean, that's remarkable. This car is like 4,500 pounds. And yet it could do that. And when you did corners, it would handle very nicely. It was still flat. It wasn't like, old Cadillacs. But at the same time, driving the car, it wasn't like a driver's car. It wasn't like driving a BMW M3 where every bump in the road was felt. No. This was a car designed to remove the discomfort of driving and yet still give you some sense of fun. Well, the McIntosh is sort of like that, but still more fun than that. But it's very comfortable. All the amenities work. It's just wonderful. The Acuhase is like the AMG version of the Mercedes. Think of an S63. So turbocharged engine, 600 and somewhat horsepower with 650 foot-pounds of torque, something like that. So 0 to 60 is even more voracious, not voracious, but vicious. You start the car and you hear, a nice exhaust rumble and growl, which is a Mercedes S-Class. It's crazy, but it has that pops and, it's insane. And when you drive it, it's definitely more of a driver's car. And when you corner, it corners hard, especially since it's got all these different settings. That's sort of what the Acuhase is like. So if you want something that's more involving, perhaps, and where the suspension settings are less comfortable. It's still comfortable, but not in the same way as the regular S-Class. Go with the Acuhase. If you want something that's much more relaxing, because you have a lot of recordings that are generally speaking not well recorded, but it's the mainstay of what you listen to, the McIntosh would be a better choice. All right, hope that helps. Question number 2. You recently did a review on the MartinLogan CLS speakers. I'm very intrigued, but the company does not make any pure electrostatic speakers anymore. Can you recommend something in the line? My budget's about $15,000. All right, so Mike will put a link, or Curtis, whoever does this video, on the CLSs I talked about. It was the toys from my attic. Check out the Impression ESL 11As or the 15A if your budget stretches. They're both superb speakers. They both have the electrostatic panel for the mid-range on-up. And in the bass, they use dedicated, custom-made woofers with amplifiers built in, and everything has been programmed and set up. So you don't have to do anything. You just have to adjust the volume, a couple other things, and you're done. In many ways, these are superior to the CLS. First, they can play a much wider variety of music. The CLS had issues. One, can't play loud. Number 2, can't play different kinds of music. It did simpler music really well, but once music got a bit complicated, it just didn't do it as well. Of course, it couldn't do bass, whereas these new speakers can do bass. They'll play very loud if you want to play them very loud. They'll play in a very big room if you wanted to do that. The CLS couldn't do it in a really big room. They're unboxy, just like, again, the CLS. And they're relatively easy to drive. I would say use a good 150, 200 watt power amplifier with some current, and you'll be fine. All of the strengths that the CLSs have are in these two speakers. The leading edge, the transients, the snaps, the unboxiness, beautiful soundstage and depth, they're all there. But add to it serious bass capability, dynamics, the ability to play all sorts of music, and you can understand why, for me, the MartinLogan hybrid electrostatic speakers, especially the ones with powered woofers, in my mind, are some of the most underrated, underappreciated speakers on the market today. If you can find a way to get them in the home, because physically they are a bit tall, visually, but if you can find a way to get them at home, I would have a hard time believing that you wouldn't like them. Okay, third question. I like this one. Dealers suck. I live in one of the largest cities in the US, and every dealer I visit only wants to know how much I'm going to spend now. They have no interest in educating me, doing demos, or really trying to know what I'm looking for. And because I dress casually, they don't take me seriously. No wonder so many have gone out of business. There was no question. It was just somebody venting to me. Mike is laughing. So first of all, I sympathize with you. When I was young, I encountered similar issues. When I was in my about 25, 26, I started to have money for the first time in my life. And so, of course, when you're young and you have money, you think about spending it. And I remember a number of times where I tried to buy cars or lease cars, and people would not take me seriously. I went into a BMW dealership, an actual BMW dealership, not a used car dealership. And the guy straight up told me you can't afford the M3. I was looking at the M3, the E46. I went to another dealership and bought that same car that week. It was Laguna Seca blue, Smurf blue as I call it. And I hated the color so much that I begged the dealer to take it back, and he gave me another one, a different color. So I understand where you're coming from. Another time, I had just done this huge deal, and the guy paid me partly in cash. And so rather than depositing the money, I had this bag of cash. It was about $25,000 or $26,000 in cash. So I called my friend Derek and Peter, said, let's go look at that Harley dealer, up the street there, up in Richmond Hill. So we drove up, and so my two friends are much older than I am. And one of them, Peter in particular, looks like the prototypical, is that the right word? Harley guy, right? Long white hair. Somebody once said he looks like Jesus. So that gives you an idea of what Peter looks like, but big, right? And he looks the part. I'm this young punk carrying a plastic bag. And so we walked up to the Harley dealer, and the salesperson thought it was Peter who wanted to buy. So started spending all this time talking to him. And then finally Peter said, oh, you should be talking to him. He's the one interested. So we started talking about the bikes and so on. And I said, do you have one I could try? I had a bike license. And the guy goes, no, all these bikes are all sold. I said, you don't even have a demonstrator? He says, yeah, we do, but we would only let you get on it if you're really, really serious. And I have to know you're serious, and you'd have to give me a deposit before. And I was so flabbergasted. And I have to also understand, part of it was I had a really, really low self-esteem. So here's this guy telling me, basically, you can't afford this again. So we left. And my friends didn't know. So we got in the car, and my friend said to me, well, that's too bad. And I took out the plastic bag I had carried, and I threw it over the front seat. And Derek, my friend, he wasn't driving, he was the passenger, opened up the plastic bag, and he was shocked. He saw all this cash. He says, holy shit, you were serious about buying it? I said, yeah, I went there to buy. So I do sympathize. I'm going to give you two perspectives. So I just mentioned the consumer's perspective. I do understand. The perspective of the dealer, not that I'm defending bad dealers, but to understand this. During strong economy, dealers get peppered with questions all the time and people all the time, and that's wonderful. But sometimes a lot of it is not serious inquiries, to put it nicely. And you can be wasting a lot of time with somebody who not only is not serious, but is actually there because he's got nothing to do and wants to hear everything. We've seen our fair share of that. And it can be very frustrating because at the end of it, you realize that you've just spent a lot of time with this person, and that person not only had no interest, had no money, and no concern at all about your time. They just thought that this was a club, he's paid membership, and he can come in and do whatever he wants. So I'm not saying, again, that there's no proper way to ascertain whether this person is right or wrong in terms of you investing your time. What I'm going to suggest is a strategy. If you are serious, and for all of you who are serious about wanting to find a good dealer and wanting to buy something from that dealer, do a little bit of initial work, in air quotes. Call the dealer up and say, look, I'm interested in X. I'm a serious buyer. This is what I currently own. It may or may not be good, but that's why I'm thinking about upgrading. I've got a certain budget. I'd like to set up an appointment to come and see you and listen to the product and have you educate me and show me and teach me about different things about what I should be looking for. Maybe this is the wrong thing. I'd like to have you teach me or show me. Right? Give me the benefit of your experience. When you say that to a normal dealer, I would like to believe most dealers would go, oh my God, great, come on in. I would love to spend time sharing with you, playing some tunes, and then seeing how I can help you. I think most dealers would be very happy to get that. And because you've introduced yourself that way, I think most dealers, again, would take all the time necessary to help you on your journey. I know we would. We would absolutely love to do that. The second thing is be serious in that you want to approach this with real thought and real commitment. It doesn't mean that what you thought you wanted to buy should be the one you buy, because it could be the wrong thing. And a good dealer would be able to know that once you've auditioned it and realized that you didn't get the reaction you wanted. A good dealer would say, absolutely, that's fine. You know, you tried, didn't work. But you need to be serious. And then while auditioning, help yourself and the dealer by voicing any concerns, real concerns you might have, whether it be compatibility issues or sonic issues. Let them know. The dealer will do their best typically to help you address those issues if they're addressable. And then finally, and this can be a real bugaboo, at least for me. Don't say at the end of it all, okay, I got to talk to my wife, or let me check with the CFO at home, and use that as the excuse. And here's why this can be a real bugaboo for me. We're not kids. I'm talking honestly and frankly with most of you who I believe are not in your teens, right? We've been around the block. If you've made this decision to come and audition something seriously, I would have to assume that you've already talked to your significant other and that he or she has said, sure. So if you want to think about it, just say, I need to think about it. It's a lot of money. But to say, I got to check with my wife and, make sure she's okay, to me, that's not a serious response. It just means that you're blowing me off. And that will bother me because, again, I'm going into this conversation with you, this time spent with you very honorably and seriously. I would want that same respect, right? The old golden rule, do to others as do not do to others. I guess whichever way you think about it, as you would want others to do to you. Pay the dealer the same respect, and you would get it back in spades, I promise you. Here's an example of a scenario that happened just this week that I to the rest of my days will remember. A gentleman emailed and said, I'm very interested in the Wilson speakers that you have. My wife and my son are both in town. They're going to come specifically, they're going to fly, specifically to come and hear the speakers on my behalf. I can't come because I'm not feeling well. Can you please help them? I said, absolutely. So set them up. The wife and son came in, lovely people, and they both know what he likes. And during the process, he called in so they could give him their real-time analysis and feedback. And all I did was play music, talk to them about the speakers, give them some insight about the speakers, how the setup would work, and so on and so forth. And then I left them to talk to him privately. And then I came back and he said, okay, I think I'd like to put a deposit on the speakers and then let you know my final decision. But I give you a deposit to hold the speakers so you don't sell them. Because I realized that he obviously was very serious, I said this to him, as I would say to most people, look, don't worry about your deposit. We'll put a $1,000 deposit, but I want you to know that I will refund the deposit to you if you change your mind. Absolutely no concerns whatsoever, because I know this is something that you've obviously thought about very seriously, and obviously your wife and son are here and they've spent all this time. So we did that. Later that day, he called, I believe, and he also emailed and said, okay, we'll go ahead. We did all the paperwork, arranged for everything, and throughout the process, he was so excited. It was very obvious through his emails and his conversations, and his wife as well gave us a lot of insight as to how long he had been thinking about this, and it was very transparent between all of them. And as a dealer, I can say to you that I felt so privileged to be able to help them as a family invest in this wonderful speaker. I felt like I was given this honor to help. They could have certainly gone to any Wilson dealer. They certainly could have gone to all kinds of other dealers to buy speakers, but because they had come here and we were given the privilege to help, I felt like my whole week was made, and as a matter of fact it was, because all through this week I kept thinking back about this experience. So Curtis, thank you for giving me that privilege and the opportunity to help you and your family. I talk about this experience just to give you an idea of how a good experience can be for both parties. And if it had turned out negatively, it would still have been a wonderful experience for me, because I know that we would have done everything we could have, and they would have done everything that they wanted to do. It just didn't work out. All right? So, question number 4. I can't afford to buy the new high-end equipment today. It seems like everything I want is insanely expensive. Any suggestions? Well, first of all, I want to point out that there are a lot of very good, affordable, high-performance, high-end products. PS Audio makes them, Hagel, Parasound, Rotel, Eversolo, Inuos, Lumen, Project Turntables, Sonus, Faber, Magnepan, and these are just brands that we sell among others that we don't. So there's a lot of very, very good high-performance products that don't cost an arm and a leg. But perhaps the issue here is that you want the very exclusive brands, and but you don't want to pay those numbers. I get it. I understand. It's I think if you polled most people, they would say, yeah, I would like a Porsche, but I want to pay a Honda. I don't see that to be an issue necessarily, just that it's just not realistic. However, there are a couple of things that you can consider. As I say, one, if you want to buy new, buy some of those brands that I mentioned. They do give you very high performance. And in fact, if you were to compare, for example, a Parasound or a PS Audio to your favorite high-end brand, you might be surprised to realize that the difference is not as large as the price is. It never is, right? It's just how it is. Also, high-end boutique brands are more expensive because they are smaller. They're a small company made by, with a company of maybe 10, 12, 15, 20 employees. On the high side, maybe 50. Most companies are quite small in the high end. So they don't have the economies of scale. They don't have the efficiencies of production. And of course, they also position their brands to be at the high end, and they will charge for it. Metalwork is more glorious. Stuff weighs more. It's just how it is. But if you truly still want the boutique brands, you can always look at the used market. There are a few outlets for that. Obviously, Facebook Marketplace, I think, is one. Audiophile is another. And then depending on where you are in the world, there's the US Audio Mart, or in Canada, Canuck Audio Mart. I happen to like the Audio Mart, Canuck Audio Mart, or US Audio Mart, because the sellers don't have to pay commissions to the portal. And so they can sell it for a more reasonable price. Whereas with Audiophile, you do have to pay a fairly high commission rate. And so you may want to look at those websites and check them out. There are some things to watch out for when you're buying used equipment. Obviously, number one, mechanical products will wear out. So whether you're looking at a transport, a CD player, a turntable, they may have wear issues. CD players and transports, the lasers may go, mechanical drawers may fail, those kinds of things. You have to look out for that. Speakers can be damaged. One of the ways that you can test for that is you put a sweeping test tone and listen carefully to see if you can hear any buzzers or rattles and so on, and that's usually a way to tell. And if you're looking for a power amplifier, like a Krell or a Mark Levinson or something that was high bias or class A, anything that's 8 or 10 years old or older, you want to be careful. In a lot of cases, the capacitors inside may need to be replaced. I know, for example, having done a lot of Krells over the years, the capacitors do need to be changed after a period of time. You want to make sure that you have a local repair person that can do it, has done it before, knows what to do, and it's not going to be cheap. I can tell you, when you do a capacitor replacement on a Krell amplifier like an FPB or KSA series, it'll run $2,500, $3,000 or more. And you also want to be careful because in many cases, manufacturers may no longer be supporting those products anymore. So if you need transistors or certain parts, you may not be able to get them. So you want to look into that. Okay, number 5. I really enjoy your videos and would love to support you. Can you ship to the USA/worldwide? Well, thank you for that. It depends. If it's pre-owned, we can ship anywhere. Just have to check the voltage and make sure that it's okay. If it's new, it's a little bit more nuanced. Most products have territories for dealers. So for example, with McIntosh, we are allowed to sell in Ontario. We can only sell to you outside of Ontario if I come and see you and deliver it and so on. I can't just ship to you, okay? But with other brands, for example, let's say you are in a certain part of the States and you have no dealer anywhere near you within a reasonable distance, contact me. I will check with the manufacturer, and if the manufacturer says yes, then we'd be more than delighted to help you. So you just have, it all depends. Now, one thing to be aware of, when we ship products across to a different country, you may be responsible for import taxes and duties and tariffs. So you want to check into that. I don't know what those numbers are. You'll have to look into that. And then secondly, you may have to pay a broker to do the paperwork. So what a customs broker does is they declare the shipment to your government. So you may have to pay a small fee for that. Those are things to be aware of. All right, so that's it for this video. Keep the emails coming if you have questions that I can answer, and I will do the next video for that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.